I've worked with tons of beginner to intermediate producers over the past several years. One big reoccurring issue that I see over and over again is the habit of overdoing it. Whether it's wanting to create melodies that are just too complex, or feeling like you need to add another synth layer or another counter melody, or you just want to keep adding more instrument layers because it feels like your mix is missing something. I could go on, but I think you get the point. These are all things that I struggled with when I was a beginner, and if you're struggling with any of these, then I think this video will definitely be very helpful for you. One piece of advice I heard over and over again many years ago when I was trying to get better at music production is to just keep things simple. Don't overcomplicate it. And that's basically where I'm going with this. However, it took me a while to figure out the balance between keeping things simple and also making things interesting enough that the listener enjoys what they're listening to and wants to keep listening. It's so much more important to focus your attention and time on creating sounds, melodies, chord progressions, and drum loops that sound good individually and also fit well together within the mix. For example, if you're layering 2 or 3 instruments or synths together to create a lead melody, ask yourself if the sounds you're layering really go together. It's possible the presets or instruments you're using just don't work well together. Sometimes it's a matter of simply getting the leveling right. It's possible that the main synth should be pretty loud in the mix, but the other 2 layers need to be turned way down to the point where you almost can't hear them, but it just adds a little extra thickness or width to your mix. It's also possible the layers need to be mixed closer to the same volume. So how do you actually know which one is right? And this is where I'm going to give you the biggest secret that no one else is willing to tell you that will instantly fix all your problems. Just kidding. That does not exist. Unfortunately, the answer is that you're going to have to put in the work, develop your ear, and practice, practice, practice. In my opinion, ear training is one of the most important things to focus on, especially as a beginner, but continuing to train your ear as an intermediate or even advanced music producer is just as important. It's one of those things that you just want to continue to level up basically forever. It's not really something that you can easily teach in a tutorial, but there are some good ear training exercises out there which will definitely help you out. There's a website called soundgym.co where you can do pretty fun ear training exercises that are specifically geared towards music producers and mixing engineers. The exercises are designed to improve listening skills and help users identify different sounds and frequencies. You can sign up for free and you'll have access to 3 of these exercises that they offer. I've never tried the paid version, but I found the free version is actually really useful. And I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in checking out more information about it. It's a good thing to do daily, and it really doesn't take that much time. If you're struggling more with coming up with melodies or chord progressions, you may need help training your ears to hear pitch better. If you go to musictheory.net, click on exercises, and scroll down to where it says ear training, I recommend trying out all of these ear training exercises and seeing how easy or how hard each one of these is for you. If you're really struggling with any of them, you know what you need to work on for a while. Another exercise you can do if you have someone willing to help you out is this. Have them play a note on a keyboard or piano, and then you need to find the note they're playing on your own keyboard or by singing. To make this exercise more challenging, use different sounds like supersaws or other synth sounds, which are rich in harmonics and can potentially trick your ear a bit more than just a normal piano sound would. The last exercise I want to talk about is something you can do anytime you're listening to music. This works best if you're listening on the same headphones or monitors that you use to produce and mix with. Instead of listening to the entire track as a whole or focusing on the lyrics, start honing in on specific elements of the song. For example, listen to just the kick. Listen closely to how loud it is compared to everything else in the mix. Listen to whether it's centered or panned. Listen to the timbre. Is the kick a real drum played by a real drummer, or is it a sample? How much low or high end is there? What frequencies does it take up? Now do this for the snare, then the hi-hat. To an extent, the genre is going to determine the type of questions you might ask yourself, but the key takeaway is to analyze and break down every single element in the track you're listening to. As you start to get better at this exercise, you'll probably start noticing and hearing things you've never heard before. I also need to take a second to address the fact that your equipment and room plays a huge role in how you actually hear things. It's important to, at the very least, have a pair of studio monitor headphones. These have a flatter frequency response than most consumer-grade headphones and allow you to hear things more accurately and to make better mixing decisions while you're producing. If you don't have a pair, I'll leave a link in the description to a couple cheap options that I recommend. Having studio monitors is also great, but if your studio isn't set up properly, there will be reflections in your room, and ultimately you're not going to hear music as accurately as it could be. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this subject in this video, but if you want to learn more about how to optimize your home studio, I'll leave a link in the description to a video, which should help you out a lot. Also, in my experience, having access to more expensive and better equipment makes a pretty big difference, but only if your ears are actually trained to hear it. Let's go back to overdoing it. When it comes to creating professional and polished tracks, one key aspect is the use of textural background elements and ambient soundscapes. These elements can add depth, richness, and ultimately help fill in the space in your mix where you might feel like you need to keep adding more instruments, another counter melody, or various other elements. Textural background elements can be anything from field recordings to processed samples to tape hiss or crackly record noise to soundscapes created with synthesizers and more. They can add a sense of realism and dimension to your tracks, but can also help achieve a fuller sounding mix. And just like everything else, it's important not to overdo it. Let's take a quick look at an example of a simple emotional pop R&B type beat that I made a while ago. I think this track does a good job of illustrating all the points I'm trying to make. Let's take a listen to the first little bit of this, and while you're listening, really focus on how simple it is, but how I use subtle background textural elements to make it more interesting. So as you can hear, it's extremely simple, and aside from this vocal, which I'm actually going to mute this and we'll take another listen real quick, the vocal is kind of the focal point of the mix, and so it makes it a little bit harder to focus in on some of the more background textural elements. But aside from the vocal, all we really have going on here is this piano, bass, and then a bunch of textural elements. So let's take another quick listen here. Got a filtered snare up here as well. But let's take a look down here. So starting with this element, this was a vocal that I recorded, and you can hear this. Let's take a look at the processing here real quick. I'm not going to go over all this, but as you can see, I have a lot of filtering, a lot of delay, a lot of reverb, and also an auto pan on there as well. But again, my goal with this vocal is to add another background textural element, and then adding the auto pan adds an even bigger layer of having it go sort of back and forth in the stereo spectrum, which in my opinion adds another layer of interest. Next, of course, we have our big soundscapes in the beginning, which sort of set the mood. So we have this light traffic effect, and then also this distant thunder, which is just a rainstorm sound. And the two of these combined really sets an atmosphere in the intro of this. I also have this filtered layer here, which is a percussion loop, and it sounds like this. So I've got some filtering and some reverb on there. Another filtered percussion loop here. This one's a little bit more in the forefront, but also kind of a background textural element. And the last thing that I want to mention here is that in this piano loop, there's actually already some vinyl crackle built into it, which already gives it a little bit of, what we're talking about, that background textural element. So let's take a listen to that. So you can hear that in there as well. So again, my goal here is I'm keeping it as simple as possible, but I'm really making sure that every single element that I use is exactly where I want it to be in the mix and adds just the right amount of texture to make it interesting. I've done very in-depth videos in the past where I break down other beats that I've made, including going over literally all the processing and mixing. So if you're looking for a more in-depth tutorial on that, I'll leave a link in the description, and something should pop up on the screen now as well. If you want to get a hold of some background textural Foley samples, there are tons of free resources out there, and I'm sure you'll be able to find a lot of good stuff just by Googling it. I'll also leave some links in the description to some free resources, and you can download my free sample pack, which is 100 free Foley and percussion samples that I recorded with my field recorder, which is actually a really fun thing to get and experiment with. If you have the money and you like sound design, I definitely recommend getting one. I have the Zoom H1N, which is basically the cheapest version of these field recorders, but it's perfect for what I need it for. And again, I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in checking it out. Also, just as a heads heads up, if you do download my sample pack, it will put you on my email list, but you can unsubscribe immediately or at any time if you don't want to be on there. Also, if you're still super confused and you think you might benefit from private lessons, I do offer one-on-one lessons via Zoom. You can find out more info about this and sign up on my website at anothermonsterproductions.com. Also, feel free to join my Discord server where we do fun producer challenges, Q&As, and other random things from time to time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.